of the Miami Hurricanes at Clemson. I'm not Bobby Durkins. In fact, I just started a live stream on the Bobby Durkins channel by accident. So if you were there, now you're here. Yeah, that's what happened. But for those of you who didn't see that, forget the last 20 seconds of what I said. So Miami's coming to town. 3:30 kickoff on ESPN tomorrow. Clemson is number 9 in the country at this point. They're only 2 weeks removed from the butt whipping they took up in South Bend against the Notre Dame team, who has been up and down. We'll see how that goes for them. But for Clemson, there's a lot of questions. They're contending for a 10-win season tomorrow. This will be another 10-win season that they have, which is fantastic. But there's also that feeling for fans like myself who are looking for at the long term, who's consistently thinking about what's this going to do for the long term if they don't fix the coaching problems that they do have, mainly on the offensive side of the ball. And a 10-win season is fantastic, but how many more of those will we have if we don't fix the problems on the offensive side of the ball? Let's dive right into Miami. Miami hired Cristobal in the off season. I thought it was a fantastic hire. I still think it's the most sensible hire that they've made in quite a while. And he's got a mess. He's got a mess down there. He's in one of the most fertile grounds that you'll ever find to recruit. And people are coming in like Clemson into his backdoor. Ohio State. I mean, imagine going to Miami, Florida, or that general South Florida area. And I know a lot of people from that area, they don't like to be referred to as South Florida. Well, it is. You're in South Florida. You're in that area, and Ohio State's coming down, pulling your guys out of beach weather and bringing them up to butt freezing snow. I mean, it's ridiculous, but they're doing it because Miami is just not the Miami of old. So they started to look pretty solid, and then everything just kind of went downhill. They're 5-5 overall, 3-3 in the conference. And this game preseason, especially about 2 weeks in, looked like it was going to be a lot more important than what it actually is at this point. I'm going to check this, but Clemson's about a 20-point favorite coming into this ball game. Give me 1 second. I actually moved to another screen. Clemson's a 20-point favorite in this game. 19 points for those of you who are really, really, pay attention. So, 19-point favorite. The over-under right now is 47.5 points. So let's talk about Miami and what's really going on with them. Tyler Van Dyke has been their quarterback. He got hurt. I want to say 2 weeks in a row he's been out. Most likely, unless they name something after this video or something I missed, we're looking at who is it? I'm sorry, I just totally went blank. It's been a long week. In a good way, but it's been a long week. Ja'Cory Brown will take his place, but Tyler Van Dyke got hurt. Ja'Cory Brown is most likely going to get the start. So, Parker Henderson says, "What you call me? I'll call you whatever I want to call you, man." I'm just kidding. I did text you and Chase. So I was supposed to be at the Tennessee South Carolina game tomorrow. Some things changed, and I will now be at the Clemson Miami game. I've been telling everybody for weeks that I will not be at the game. And today I picked up some really good tickets because people are just unloading them because now Miami's terrible. And so I think everybody's focusing on the South Carolina game, the ACC championship, in a couple of weeks. But I picked up a couple of tickets, so I will be there at the game. So if Parker and/or Chase is going to be there, I'll definitely try to meet up with y'all and say hello. Also, Tiger Nation, I talked to him a little bit ago, and he said, well, text him and let him know that I'll be down there. So hopefully I'll run into him. And Slim Shady Canes, I heard he's going to be up there at the game. So let's dive in a little more into this. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun time in the Valley tomorrow. Miami, let's look at their season so far, and I'm just going to run through this really quick. Start off the season with a cupcake game, and I'll tell you this, the more and more I think about it, I'm not against easier games at the beginning of the season to totally get people used to running the scheme, especially when you have a new coaching staff, because when you get into the games, when you get into the middle, you know, part of the season, and or 4 games in, and now you're finally playing someone who's a worthwhile opponent. You can, most likely, unless some crazy injuries happen, you're actually going to get to see two teams who's they're running full speed, they're playing really well, and then they're going to play. So you're going to see the best game possible. But when you play like Oregon versus Georgia, which by the way, I'm glad that Oregon went ahead and got that second loss. They're out of the convo. I didn't like that they were automatically. I say automatically, but they were already in the playoff talk when nobody who has half a football brain, other than an Oregon fan who's just you're pulling for your team, you want them in. Georgia could have dropped 70 or 80 points on Oregon in that game, and they finally called, no pun intended, the dogs off. So it's good to see that happen, but I like to see teams. I'd like to see that game when both teams were about 3 or 4 weeks into the season. Miami, they played Bethune-Cookman. They won. They played Southern Miss the next week. They won. Then they went and they played a Texas A&M team who had just lost to Appalachian State at home. Barely lost that game 17-9. Then here's and we turn around and we look at that game and we now know that Texas A&M is one of the worst teams in the SEC. And though they've bought a lot of really good players with that new little money laundering system we call NIL, and then we get to Middle Tennessee State, and they lose by 2 touchdowns to Middle Tennessee State at home. It was in Miami, and how that happens, I really don't know. I don't care if you were down to your 4th string quarterback. You should have won that ball game against Middle Tennessee State. The very next week, it's more understandable. You lose to a North Carolina team who has been playing lights out. They only have 1 loss on the season. So that's definitely understandable. When you get to Virginia Tech the next week, you do win. Then you play Duke. Duke's playing a lot better football this year, especially for Duke. They lost that ball game by 45-21. The next week, they went into 4 overtimes against Virginia, which Virginia is a blah team. I really hate what's went on with their program, but this is not talking about their program. This is just or as far as the individuals. I'm just talking about their team as a whole. Is just not. They've been terrible. Then they turn around and lost to Florida State 45-3. That was really a kick in the gut. The next week they played Georgia Tech, which was this past week. They beat Georgia Tech 35-14 in Atlanta. So they come right back up the road to about 2 hours north of Atlanta to play Clemson. And so the biggest news is that most likely Tyler Van Dyke is not going to be playing this game. For Clemson, on the other hand, I'm just going to be quite honest with you. I did not look at the injury report because it's up and down. I do know that Malcolm Green is out for the rest of the season, from what I understand, and XT's done for the season. We know that Trenton Simpson's had some injuries. Where he's at on that, quite honestly, I don't know. Drop that in the comment section, if you will. But the reason I just didn't dive into this game is because Miami's been so bad. Now, best case scenario, let me give you the best case scenario for each team. First of all, Miami comes out, surprises them, especially with Ja'Cory Brown. Clemson has very little film on him. They come out, and they use that to their advantage. If I am Miami, I go back to the Notre Dame game and I look at it and I say, yeah, we have different athletes, but at the same time, we could take a page out of Miami could take a page out of Notre Dame's playbook just to try to execute against Clemson. I mean, it was the one game that not only beat Clemson, but it demoralized them. It made you question everything. Right down to Sweeney, so that is the game plan that I would use against Clemson. That would be the best case scenario. Clemson, on the other hand, uh, bring different looks to this quarterback. He it's like when Clemson did play Pine, the backup quarterback for Notre Dame. He was what, 4 or 5 games in, 6 games in, something like that. The truth is, this cat, he has what, two or three starts, if that. Bring the different pressure, come after him, and make him show you something. On the offensive side of the ball for Clemson, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Even when you're playing against a team who has a really good front, still run the ball, mix in the passing game. We will talk some stats. To me, stats are they can be inflated from playing easier games. So they mean something, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. Clemson's averaging 34 points per game. Miami's averaging 25 points per game. Clemson's averaging giving up 21 on the defensive side of the ball and 23.9 points per game allowed by Miami. Now, total yards, Clemson's averaging about 409 per game. It's almost even split, 227 in the air, 182 on the ground. Miami, 393 total yards, 253 in the air, 140 on the ground. It's still more balanced. Clemson's a little more balanced, but it's something that you have to respect across the board. Both defenses has given up between 340, 350 yards in the air. Clemson's more stubborn on the actual difference is literally Clemson's more stubborn by 14 yards on the running side of the ball. So you have to think. You have to think about that. That will be a factor if Miami tries to run the ball a little more. Yet again, we saw what we saw a couple of weeks ago with Notre Dame, and no 10 wins unless you win the conference championship and go to the playoff and at least contend well will erase what Notre Dame did to Clemson. At least not in my. That's not me being pessimistic. That's just me being honest. I can't forget what happened just 2 weeks ago. But winning the conference, making it to the playoffs, and coming out and playing well in it, that would help. But I don't think the playoff thing is going to actually happen. But anyway, that's a different story for a different day. DJ, he's thrown 5 interceptions on this season. We see Shipley only needs 101 yards to crack 1,000 for this season. He's been doing great. Last week jumped over a player, split 2 tackles, and ended up in the end zone. That was incredible. Antonio Williams continues to do what he's doing, and that's just mesmerizing everybody that he's coming out and playing very, very well. You will notice that Parrish Jr. is the running back for Miami. 120 carries, 569, 4 touchdowns on the ground as well. So, what do I think about this game for Clemson and what they need to do in this? I know Rook Aurora. I always mess up his name. I actually met him at a place I used to work. Rook was very nice, very cool cat. But he said we're not going to take Miami lightly. I pray that y'all don't take them lightly. I think right now that you or lightly. I'm thinking about something else, but don't take them lightly. Clemson is in fix it mode, in my opinion. A great way to fix it is to come out and everyone run their assignments. This is a place, and I want to make a very bold statement here, and this deals with Miami, this deals with Clemson, it doesn't deal with Miami, it deals with Clemson. And that, and right now, for some reason, my phone is starting to freeze up, and I don't get that, but anyway, I believe, especially the offensive coaching. That's where I'm at. I know everybody wants to talk about Goodwin. He gave up 28 points against Notre Dame. I know the score was 35-14, but anybody who no, excuse me, he gave up 21 points. They gave up 21 points in that game. So there was a pick six that was ran back, and there was a block punt. So he gave up 21 points. Sometimes your defense is going to come out and give up some points. Your defense cannot go into a game, for most teams, no matter who they are, and just be guaranteed, oh, we're only going to give up 7 to 10 points per game, and if we give up more than that, we're losing. I understand the philosophy, I understand the angle, but folks, you need to understand something. If your defense has to be spot on every game, but your offense can lag around, namely on the play calling, that's not team sports, folks. That's one side gets to be lazy. I'm not talking about the players on the offensive side. I'm talking about the coaching on the offensive side. While over here we have to be world class excellent while you get to be subpar. That's not team sports. If every and I know I can right now see the mirage of comebacks to that by quoting some world class coach who drove people and drove people and drove people and drove people. That's great and fantastic. Bear Bryant was fantastic. And remember, he drove someone so hard that they ended up basically having a stroke and they couldn't play anymore. So you it's good to drive, but you can't kill somebody in driving to make them do better. With that said, in this scenario, the defense is not the problem. We know that. You know that. I know that. Anybody who's being honest with themselves know that. If you talk to one of the players, of course, they're going to go with the mantra of, well, we're all a team. Good. That's great. Glad you're buying in. I'm wondering if your offensive side of the ball understands that, namely your coaching. I'm not talking about the players. This is a place to start fixing it. It's a 5-5 football team. They are Miami. They do have good athletes. Cristobal is a good coach. They're just having to rebuild from years and years of poor hiring and poor decisions by Miami. And then the years that they were winning, it was years and years of bad decisions because they were recruiting players by bringing prostitutes in and had the drug community heavily involved. So my point here is that for Clemson, this is a game that you can actually fix some stuff. And you can either fix it or you can go in next week, play South Carolina, possibly beat South Carolina. Once you beat South Carolina, the question is, can you play North Carolina and play them well? So to me, this game's much more than Miami tomorrow. This is a game that says Clemson is actually focused on fixing things or they're not. So I think Clemson, I know that they just had a more convincing win against Louisville. I didn't even do a reaction to that. Just quite honestly, I'm kind of like mentally drained when it comes to figuring out what's going on, especially with this coaching staff, namely the offensive side of the ball. And so I will say this, folks, is that this I say Clemson wins this game in about 31-14, 31-17, a score like that. And I know somebody is like, you mean our defense is going to get... I didn't say our defense. Remember, our defense gave up 21 points up at South Bend. Our team gave up 35. So, the final score is not indicative of what the defense did. You got to break it down. And if you took out the pick six and the block and those things that we've seen this season, the block punt, that was literally just picked up and guy was standing basically in the end zone. The defense's numbers, as far as the points allowed per game, is different. And so, but it did happen. It is part of the team. But I'm saying when you're having to fix a problem, you have to get granular. Getting granular. Clemson's defense did not lose that game at Notre Dame. Clemson's offense did, and their coaching did. It's their coaching mainly. So, between you and I don't know what to expect. I hope Clemson wins this ball game, and I hope that we see that someone realizes that there are 1,000 people out there who would rather, who would love to come to Clemson and be paid handsomely to call offense for them. And if we want to use this whole thing, well, DJ doesn't get the playbook. If he's not going to get the playbook now, he's not going to get the playbook ever. If we want to use the excuse of, maybe there's some players who's not that intellectual that's playing for us, then why the crap are they on the field? That's my question. So we'll see. I don't know. Clemson wins this game somewhere in the 31-14, 31-17. So, all right, pass this along to your friends and neighbor. I'm going to do a video right after this talking about a coaching rumor involving our very own Dabo Swinney. I'm Brian Knight. I'm not Bobby Durkins. Pass this around. Thanks for joining me. Hit subscribe. All those other things you're supposed to do. Go Tigers.